Welcome, everyone. This is our third symposium session of the day. Welcome to anyone who is joining in for the first time today, or if you've been a total trooper and are at all three, welcome back. If you could all just pop into the chat and say hello, and then we'll know chat is going and you can see and hear all of us. Let's see, we've been asking people where they're calling in from, but we did that the last two sessions, so let's switch it up a little bit. So maybe say hello and let me know your favorite color in the chat. Let's learn some people's favorite colors this time around. Lots of pinks right off the bat. I see some green, that's mine as well, green and orange. I think I just saw it fly by that someone said plaid is their favorite color, which I love.
It's flying by here.
Yes, active chat. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. All right, I know we are all here to learn from Danika, so I'm going to go ahead and jump right into some intros so we can throw it over to her. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you missed it earlier, my name is Jessie Katz-Greenberg. I'm the Artist Community Manager here at Spoonflower, and I'm so excited for this event that we've put together today. Today's event is being co-presented by Spoonflower and Craft Industry Alliance. Spoonflower is a print-on-demand manufacturer that produces wallpaper, home decor, and fabric. Our online global marketplace connects makers and consumers with independent artists all over the world who earn royalties every time their designs are purchased. Any artist can set up shop now at spoonflower.com to start or grow your surface design business. And at Craft Industry Alliance, they know that building a business is a lot of hard work, so you don't have to go it alone. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals where you can get advice and support every single day. Build your network alongside other artists and makers, plus get in-depth coverage of craft industry news and ideas, tools, and resources to help you make smart decisions. And you can learn more and join now at craftindustryalliance.com. So with that, Danika, I am going to pop it over to you for an introduction so you can get going. I'm going to move behind the scenes, so I will see everyone in chat.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Danika Herrick. I'm super excited to be here, and thank you, Craft Alliance and Spoonflower, for having me. So I am here today to talk about elevating your designs for home decor and wallpaper. My background, it's kind of a long and winding path of how I got to where I am right now doing surface design, but I originally started off going to school for art and then working as a decorative artist in New York City, painting floors, walls, furniture, and that led me to my love of interiors. And I decided I wanted to go back to school and do interior design. I want to do the whole room. So went back to school for it up in Boston, where I am now. And that was over 20 some years ago. And while I was in school, I got to work at 2 fabric showrooms where I got bitten by the fabric bug and really got to learn and see how the big guys do it, which was really cool to have that background information. And then I did interior design for over 20 years, and I discovered Spoonflower in 2011. I was actually starting a fretwork company and having to learn Adobe all over. When I first learned Adobe was in college, which was in the 90s. So it was Photoshop 1.0 basically. So 2011, it was like, several versions later, like so many more tools. So I learned Adobe and I discovered Spoonflower, and then I was like, I could actually make fabric, and I was using Spoonflower as an interior designer to make patterns for my clients and to give them custom options. So that was huge. And at the time, Spoonflower didn't really have a lot of home decor fabrics. And did you guys even have wallpaper? I really don't remember in 2011. But I remember the wrapping paper was there. So it was, so that's how I kind of started off with the fabric design. And I would just do it on the side. And then it wasn't really until like a couple of years ago that it really started to take off. And I was like, this is a part-time job and I want it to be my full-time job. So I really kind of focused on that and kind of built up my patterns more. And I would spend every second that I wasn't working for a client designing and creating on Spoonflower. So I'm just really excited now that this is what I get to do, and I absolutely love it. I basically sit in this office 24/7. You could ask my family, like when I wake up, I'm so excited to be able to do what I do that I just get up and I start designing, and I'm here until like dinner time. So, and then back again probably later. But yeah, so that's kind of where I came from and how I ended up here. And so my patterns, I really do have since I have that interior design background, I am very home decor based with my patterns. And I probably wouldn't know how to design for like kids apparel or anything like that. I'd have to actually take a class for that. So this is kind of my arena. So I'm hoping that I can help you guys out. And if you're new to home decor or looking to branch into it, I'm hoping that I can have some answers for you guys. So I'm going to try to stay on track too, because I could tangent really well. So the one great thing as an interior designer that I really love about Spoonflower, and this is something why, when you're doing home decor, when you're dealing with customers, it is really important to know this and also just express this, especially if you're working with interior designers, but to let them know just like the fact that you can print on over 25 fabrics, 4 different wallpaper substrates, and you're able to, as an artist, you have that option if you want to customize for your customers. So to be able to offer a custom design, custom colors with like a less than 2-week turnaround and a 1-yard minimum on all those substrates is groundbreaking. It's a complete industry disruptor for interiors. And I think that is such a great selling point for the home decor department. And also, this is something too that as you go into the home decor kind of arena, this is where you are going to want to like the first thing I can tell anyone is if you're going to do whatever, even if you're doing, it doesn't matter what your area that you're trying to market to is. When you are designing, you really need to kind of figure out your style. It's so easy to want to jump in and you see something, you're like, oh, this is really popular, I'm going to make this. But if you could actually kind of, with interiors especially, kind of figure out your style, like look around your house, like are you modern? Are you mid-century? Are you like rustic boho? I mean, there's so many different styles. And if you could actually kind of figure out what your style is, and it should be a blend, it shouldn't just be one thing, and really focus on that. Design for yourself. That is the biggest piece of advice I can give, because it's going to be authentic. You're going to create a style that is truly unique in your own. You're going to find that you have a color palette that you gravitate toward. I am like blue and white is my thing. I like pinks and reds and I like blue and green. So I design heavily in that colorway often. And you're going to find this as well. So design for yourself, be your own client. Like if you are trying to figure out something, I always like, just decorate the room, make a virtual room and decorate it. But that's going to really help you with getting used to scale and the way colors and patterns kind of play in a space, as opposed to how they look on apparel or on like, for quilting fabrics, how they all look together on a quilt. It's very different. And scale is one of the biggest things too. So determine your style, design for yourself, and then figure out that color palette. You're going to want to, I'm going to share my screen shortly to kind of go over textures. And also go over, I want to kind of just show you, I also am going to have some textures for you guys, but I wanted to show you with color palettes. I'm going to talk about that because saving your color palettes is huge. It just saves a ton of steps down the road. I'm sure a lot of you, if you guys have been doing this for a while, if you're like an advanced Photoshop, I'm hoping this is like, you're probably going to have other ways of doing things. And that's the thing is I was kind of had to relearn this, and I taught most of myself how to do all this. I did a lot of Skillshare, a lot of Google, but I know that there's probably 20 ways to skin a cat on Photoshop, and the ways I do it is probably going to be different from other people. So bear with me, and I will try to really kind of take my time and explain this. And I know that my screen also might look kind of small on your screen. So if you have questions, or if someone, just send, I'm going to not be able to see the comments, but, let them know. And if they might be able to kind of reach out to me and say, could you repeat that? So, now going on to designing for home decor. So we have color. You want to have your color palette that is, your colors, but you also because we're all here, you know, to design, but we also hope to make some sales and make some money. You need to also be up to date with current trends. So, you know, and the way that I always say is like to look for trends is get yourself a stack. I have so many design magazines like on my desk here, and I just dog ear the things that I like. And that's especially good for when you're trying to find your style, or if you're trying to come up with color palettes. Like when I see something I love, I dog ear it. Then I kind of go back and I'm like, what is it that I liked about this? Like, is it the color? Is it is it all the negative space in this pattern? And start to figure out what those things that really work for your brain is, and like make note of that, and then try to incorporate that kind of either layout or, you know, color palette into your own designs. And the scale too, because sometimes you're going to be like, wow, I would never think to make that pattern so big, but it looks great. So really keep your eyes open, take notes, figure out your style. And then when it comes to your layouts and your patterns, you're going to want to kind of, as you would with create collections, as you would with any, you know, genre, and you're going to need to have with interiors. It's all about the mix. And, you know, a plaid goes with a stripe, goes with a small print, goes with your hero, and your hero is going to kind of dictate your color palette and the scale of everything else. But you're going to want to actually really think about layering each of these patterns in these collections together. And, you know, so you can do a plaid, and it's probably going to work with many collections. Plaid, stripes, small prints, and block prints and little trellises, they are huge in interiors. So, you know, really develop your arsenal and build it with the basics, and then kind of have those heroes that can work with it by just simply recoloring it or rescaling it to go with a new design. And then I want to talk to you about repeats, because this is something that I actually got asked about on Instagram by 2 people asking about how do you do your repeats for home decor. And this is one of the most important things, because when I started on Spoonflower, it was a lot more of like the 42-inch wide quilting with fabric. And when you're dealing with home decor fabrics, the average size is 54 inches wide. So, and then you're dealing with wallpaper, which is 24 inches wide. So all the factors of 24 are great repeat sizes, but also I used to do all my repeats mostly in 12 and 24s, some 6s. You can do 8s, but in order to do that on wallpaper, you have to create a 24-inch wide tile with 3 repeats across. So it gets a little tricky, but for your repeats, especially with home decor fabrics, I now, as my golden rule, I usually create my canvases for larger prints at 27 inches wide, and for the smaller prints at 13.5. And this is because one of the things is I do have several patterns that are 12-inch repeats across, but when you're dealing with interior design, you're going to be dealing with the break of, you know, the repeat breaking unevenly across the fabric, which isn't a huge deal. But if it's going to a workroom, or if it's someone that's just buying it to do it themselves, if they have to seam 2 pieces together, they're not going to match up. They're going to have to cut off. Like if it's a 24-inch wide repeat, it's going to go across to 48 inches. And then you're going to be left over with this 6 inches that you're going to have to trim off so that it could seam to the next piece. So that's why I prefer to do 13.5 and the 27 for my fabrics. And then I will do the same pattern at 12 and 24 for the wallpapers. It's usually not a big deal. Most people don't do matching like wallpaper and drapes. And if they do want to do that, you know, they could reach out to you and you could upload it at 12 inches for fabric and just let them know that you're going to have this waist on the end. So yeah, so repeats, factors of 24, and then for fabric, add in the 13.5 and 27-inch wide for your canvases. Because you'll upload it to 27 inches, you get 2 for big patterns, you get 2 widths across. And when you upload it, it'll actually automatically size down to 24 in wallpaper. Now, let me go into textures, because when I started doing this, I actually drew my first pattern in Photoshop with a mouse. I didn't have a tablet. I didn't have an iPad. I drew it with a mouse, and it was the most painstaking. It's awful, but everything looked very crayon cartoony. And that's where by adding textures, you lose sometimes that crispiness. The crispiness is great when you're doing more modern or geometrics or bold or kids patterns. But if you want to get into certain areas of home decor, sometimes you're going to want to have that feel of antique linen, really kind of a distressed look. So these textures are going to be great. So I'm going to share my screen right now, and I'm hoping everyone can see it. And we're going to go to Photoshop here. Okay, so I don't know, let me see actually for a second. I was wanting to, I don't know if you guys could, if I'm still up here, but I did have two little swatches of fabric. So to create textures, you could use anything. You could use a photograph or you can scan it. I personally prefer to scan in my textures simply because it gives it a balance of light. You're not dealing with shadows. It's pretty evenly balanced. And you just get a great resolution. And so I like to scan in everything, but I'm just going to be, I scanned in some fabric swatches here. And, but you could also, you know, take a picture of concrete. You could take, you know, you could do it like a rubbing and kind of use the charcoal rubbing to kind of get that gritty texture. But there's so many ways to do textures. And you could also do this in Illustrator, but I'm a Photoshop girl. So I'm going to show you how I do it in Photoshop, and I'm sure it's going to be different than some people do it. And I know that there's a texture class actually that's going to be coming up on Spoonflower in the next month, and I can't wait to take that because I want to see how the other half live and how they do it. So okay, so let me just share you right now. So what I did here is I took a piece of fabric. This is my scanner screenshot. I like to scan at a 600 DPI resolution in black and white. And the reason is because I'm not going for color textures. I am just going for contrast. That's what I want. I want the little white dots as a texture. I want the black little lines as a texture. From this one piece of fabric, you can probably create like 5 or 6 textures. And I have 3 textures for you guys that they're going to give you guys the link to that will have the highlights and the shadows of that original. It's like a sweater, and then it's 2 different kind of chunky weave fabrics. But you could actually shut off all the layers, go back to the original, and you could kind of play with contrast and create your own and like see what else you can make with it. So in this case, I have scanned this in 600 DPI, black and white, and then so this is actually, I'm going to show you here. Let me get to that one that I just scanned in. So these are a couple of the fabrics I scanned in. Here's it was originally this green piece of fabric. And then I have also a white woven that was like the other chunky one. And I had a third one, and this is another one this is the like more of a linear. So when you scan in, you are going to want to now look at the first thing you're going to do is open it in Photoshop, and you're going to want to, because you scanned it as a black and white, I always transform it. I go to edit, convert to profile. And then in this case, I've already saved this as an RGB, but it will usually say scanner gray or black and white. I will click under profile working RGB because that's what you're going to be uploading in Spoonflower, and you're going to be probably putting it into your RGB files, and it's just seamless for me. So I like to do this first, and then I save it. I save that color profile, and then I'm going to check the scale. And you're going to want to have your scale. I like to save my tiles around, depending upon, I usually like to save them at like 12 by 12, or depending upon how big they import, at 300 DPI and 12 by 12 or 8 by 8, because 300, if your file is 300, it's going to be exactly that size. And you could, when you lay your patterns, when you lay these patterns of seamless textures you're going to make in, you can scale up and you can scale down. So now that I have this open here, I am going to check my image size, and this scanned in 600 DPI at 7 inches. That's fine. I'm actually going to make this, I'm going to have it be because I'm going to reduce the DPI. I'm going to have 8 by 8 by, let's make this 300. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crop this, where we want to make a seamless pattern. And right now, if I was to look at the pattern, and how you do that is just go to view, pattern preview, and you'll see this is what I got to get rid of all that white, and I need to kind of match these edges up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crop, get rid of my view. And I do not use a regular crop tool because you can see it kind of has like, it's not perfectly square. So I go to my crop tool, I hold that down, and I use a perspective crop tool, which is right below the crop tool. Click on that. And what this is going to allow you to do is to take a wonky shape and make it perfectly square. And to do that, we're going to kind of choose. I'm going to start at this top corner here. Let's say on this strip right here with this this light color. I'm going to go right at the top corner of this little piece of string, click here, and then I'm going to run this as straight as I can across that dark line. Let's just click it to here. So I started on the edge of it. I'm going to click on the edge of one over here. So it's kind of matching it up. And then I'm going to go down this edge. Let's say I'm going to try to find something that looks pretty straight down here. You don't have to do the whole thing. You're just going to want to get a chunk of this texture. And as you see, this line gets fatter as it goes down. So we're going to want to kind of get that in there. I'm going to bring it down to about here. Click, and then run it back across. And I want it to line up right here with the edge of this. So I'm going to bring it down this one to the same line right around here. It's not going to be perfect, and this is where I'm going to have to do a little bit of editing. But when I hit enter, it's going to become a perfect square. And there you go. So when I look at my view pattern preview, it's actually not too bad. It looks pretty good. I can see a bit of a straight line. And the way that you are going to deal with this is I like to just offset very slightly so I can see that line. So I'll go to filter, other, offset. And here, this is set to 400 by 400, which brings it in like just like 1.5 inches. That works so I can see it. And then all you're going to do to clean this up is you're going to kind of zoom in. And this whole line here, it has a little bit of everything going on. I could clean this up further. I might actually want to, I need to clean this up further. I need to actually recrop that. Just go back. And because I did not get it perfectly up the side here, I kind of absorbed the next line. So let me just recrop. And I can do that by going here. You start at the bottom. Go up along that edge to here. Let's go there. And there. All right. Now let's do that again. I'm going to offset that again. Okay, sorry. So this is a little bit better, and it's actually I could probably use this as is, but I wanted to share with you just how to fix this in case you have some really like obvious marks. This is now when you're going to want to clean up, your file and make sure that it is, pretty seamless. And so here I'm kind of getting these hard lines. So what I use is the clone stamp. And I like to kind of go over to, I'm going to be working on these kind of chunkier edges. So I'm going to click right along the edge here on this one right on the side. And I'm going to hold down Option and pick that up. And then just bring that over and draw up. I went down a little too low there. That's okay. But so I'm going to do that again. I'm going to make sure I make note it's on the middle. So it's on the center. You're going to bring it up. And then you'll keep on, and this is going to continue taking you up to the rest of, oops. You're going to kind of just continue working up, and that got a little bump there, but you could keep just filling in. It's just going to kind of take, this clone stamp is going to keep cloning what's over on this side onto here. And it's pretty, you could get rid of that hard line. And so I would just continue doing this all the way down. For these little tiny dotty textures, like I might want to, in some areas, like it kind of dies right there. If I don't have a piece of string, a nubby thread there, like for here where these threads cross, you can actually hit your Option and kind of pick that up and drag it across to kind of fill in. And you're going to kind of clean up and do this along your edges. And I have a piece of string here, which I can kind of do the same clone stamp to remove. But the main thing is that once you get it to where you like it, is now we're going to pick up the highs and the lows of this pattern. So in here, I think I have this already done, but I also have another one, this white woven one, as well as this guy here. So I wanted to show you, because this is one that I'm going to add to your texture pack. This I don't believe is in your texture pack. So this was a chunky white woven. And so all you're going to do now that you have your kind of seamless pattern, you're going to want to really, you're going to want to first save your file, because continually save your file, because Photoshop, especially in my case, I don't know why it's been a little off and it's been closing on me occasionally. So continue to save your file, name it the texture that you want to name it. And then you're going to go to image, adjustment, and brightness contrast. And I want you to really pump up your contrast, like play around with the slider, because you want it, what you're going to be picking up with your magic wand is the highs and the lows to create your texture. So if you really want to get more dark, I could bring the brightness down, contrast goes up, and you're now, I'm going to delete these layers, just like we're going to pretend that I never did anything on here. I just got my seamless pattern all ready to go. So what you're going to do is you're going to start with your background, make sure it's unlocked, and you are going to take your magic wand, and we want to do the shadows first. So I want to go to my magic wand, and for some reason my tools are not showing here. Hang on a second. And okay, well, so normally I have my magic wand, I don't know why I'm not able to get that up right now, but I go to my magic wand, and normally at the top I have it where it will let me do the, how strong do I want. I like to start off at 25 and I take my magic wand and I will highlight, and I will this picks up, if I zoom in, you'll see it's picking up the darker, but I want to get all that gray. So I'm going to hold down my shift key and just keep picking up all of this texture here. And so now I'm going to do Command J to duplicate that layer, which all that does is I now have that texture and I'm going to name it Shadow. I'm going to call this one, this is the chunky weave. I'm going to say Shadow Weave. And now we're going to do the lighter woven. So on this, we're going to go back to your first layer, use your wand. I'm going to pick up the white, and then again, Command J, and this one I'm going to name it Highlight Weaves. And I can test out my textures by hiding the back layer and then adding a new layer. And I'm going to put a color behind this so I could look at it. And I just have a blank layer, and all I do is I go to my swatches, and let's make this let's just make it a tan, or let's just do it blue. Let's have a blue background. And so now you can see how this layer looks. If I remove that one, this is your highlights. And it looks like nothing right now, I know, but let me show you now how to use your textures. With these textures, you're going to want to use we're going to use your blending modes, we're going to use color filters, and we're going to use the opacity. So first of all, up here, right in your layers panel, you're going to see where it says right next to opacity, where it says normal, these are your blending layers, and you are going to you can scroll through, make sure that your layer is highlighted, and then you could kind of scroll down and see how that kind of starts to create, like it blend. I use multiply a lot. I use color. I use, there's a couple that are my favorites, but this is where there really is no one size fits all. You're going to kind of play around to see what, like, do you want it to be a highlight? You can also do this by adding a color, by changing the color and getting the same effect. But here, you're going to want to just play around with your blending modes here. I'm going to stay with normal right now, because I want to show you also, here is where you can also add a color. So let's add a really pale blue, and you're just going to take that color, and I just drop it right onto my layer and create a color mask. And this filter is going to allow me to put that color directly on top of that. It stayed opaque because it's in normal, but you could keep it as is, but now you can also do the same thing we just did with the the blending modes with your color filters. And this kind of gives you a whole bunch of looks too. So keeping it in normal, I'm now going to show you the third way that you can kind of blend in your layers, and that is by using opacity. With your opacity, you can use the slider and take it up and down. And I'm going to show you this in an actual pattern. So, because right now it really doesn't look like much. So we're going to keep so that's another way you can do it. And then you could kind of have you could have blending modes on your color and your layer with different opacities to get all different results. But this is where I want you guys to kind of play around and see, like, how do you like it? What do you like? You know, take notes. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm going to actually just shut off my background. And all I want to do is I'm going to now create a seamless pattern that I can drop into another design. And so I'm going to go over here to, just wanted to show you really quickly what we're going to do. So this right here is a pattern of mine. That was a block print I did. And this is what it looked like as a block print, which was fine. But I added a simple woven dotty texture into it to kind of give it a little bit more depth and a little bit more kind of, I just kind of feel like sometimes it makes it feel a little bit older. It looks great if you have a very smooth, say for like the organic cotton sateen, and you want it to feel like linen. This is where you're going to want to do that. And especially there's wallpapers like the smooth pre-pasted. It might look just like wrapping paper, but when you add texture, it kind of breaks it up and it gives it a little bit more richness, and it just looks a little bit higher end. So in this case, I had just put this layer is my texture, and I dropped a color. There is no blending modes at all. If I take this off, the original was a gray. I just turned it to a lighter blue to kind of, complement that blue in the background. So to do this, I'm going to go with a simple design here that is kind of simple and sweet, and it looks fine the way it is, but I want to make it feel like it's printed on linen. And to do that, like, I actually have a linen texture in here with a color mode on it to give it that feel of linen, but I want to use that new texture we just created. So we're going to go back to, remember which one I was on here. We were on chunky here. All right, so on this one, I'm going to now create a tile that is seamless that I can then fill all my patterns with. So to do that, you're going to want to make sure that this pattern here, I'm going to check the image size, make note of it. This is 8 by 8 at 300. And I'm going to go back to this, and I'm going to save this, make sure, let me see, this one it's already 8 by 8 by 300. Now I'm going to save this into my patterns. And to do that, you're just going to go on to edit, define pattern. And I'm going to call this one, this is the shadow chunky. And I also, when I do this, I like to type into, besides the name, I like to say that it is 8 by 8, 300 DPI. And that's just so it's easy to find when I go through my patterns. All right, and now I'm going to go back to that pattern, and we're going to drop this in. So let me just show you a couple things that when you're doing this. First, you're going to want to start by having a brand new, this is an empty layer. I just added a layer and put it up at the top here. But you're going to want to fill this layer with your pattern. So you're going to go back to edit and then go to fill. Click on fill, and here comes this is going to say custom pattern. And here are all your patterns that you've saved. And I could hover over, and this should say, when I hover shadow chunky, I know that's the right one. So I'm going to click OK. And it's going to ask you your scale. So I could drop it in as is at 8 by 8, but let's make it half the scale. So it's 4 by 4. So I'm going to put the pattern scale at 0.5, and I'm going to click OK. And now it's laid the pattern on top of my design. And now here's the fun part. This is where you're going to kind of experiment. But you can do something as simple as keep it as your blending mode normal. And then I'm going to take a color that's just a hair darker than what I have for my background and drop it on top. And it looks like linen. I'm like, but it's kind of really, it's a bit more opaque, and it's blocking out a lot of my design here. So I can play around with the opacity to bring that down. That I really don't love. So I'm going to actually now play with a blending mode, and I'm going to try going down and maybe doing multiply, because multiply makes it transparent so you can see everything through it, and it really kind of sits in there nicely. And now that I like that, I still think it's a little dark, so I will play with the opacity once again and see if I want, I can make it lighter, darker. My color, it's solid, it's normal, it's opaque. I could try doing it as a color, which makes it a little bit more transparent, and taking that, moving this around. So these are all different ways to play with your textures and add them to a design to kind of make them feel a little bit more elevated. And so in this case, I'm going to be going with, I had 2 textures I played with, a simple, just dropping it in a white texture. But this is where once again, these are textures that I have in my arsenal. When your whole thing is just to go around, scan, photograph, create a whole pile of textures, and then just drop them in and play around. Because you can see just by adding that color filter on top of your layer. And once again, the way you do that, if I delete this whole layer, is here's your texture layer. You're just going to pick a color, drag, and drop it on. And if you want to change, if you don't like that color, you can simply take your eyedropper, as long as that color is selected, and click around, and I can change. I use this feature all the time to recolor my designs, and it's something that I didn't realize I can do until like a few years ago, and it blew my mind. And I do it for every layer now for changing colors. So that's a simple way to do your color. And so now moving on from textures, I just wanted to tell you guys, besides textures, the other thing you can do, you could have a pattern that's not selling, let's say, and it could just, or it's not multi-purpose. For example, I had these trees that I created on wallpaper, 24-inch panels that the tree filled. They're very complicated. They're not easy to understand on Spoonflower. People were like, wait, I want this on fabric. It doesn't translate well to fabric. So I kind of took a design that was really created for wallpaper, and I made it into an all over design by taking the branch of one of the trees and just carefully creating a repeat and moving everything around. And once again, I did add, you can see there is a texture, and you can see how much depth by putting that little subtle texture in the background, how much it changes the look and the feel. So let me just get out of my screen share for a second so I haven't been able to see anyone's comments while I'm in here. Okay, here we go. And I'm just having a technical difficulty. Okay, I'm back. Okay, so guys, I just wanted to kind of like wrap up here though and answer your questions. I know I kind of covered a bunch of stuff, and you guys probably have other questions about home decor that I didn't touch on. But this is something that when you have patterns, you might have, I just wanted to really quickly tell you about when you have patterns that are sleepers. I have plenty of them. That's when I I have to go back and look at them and be like, why isn't this selling? What's wrong with it? This is when you want to enlist your design friends. You need a critique. You need people to give you feedback. Is it the color? Is it the scale? Do some, get some samples in Spoonflower. Make the scale bigger, smaller, and then add texture, change out the backgrounds, change out the colors. But really, like, having a couple friends that have a good design eye that you can trust, they're invaluable. And it is so helpful. And also just, the other thing is I do a ton of custom design, and let me tell you, doing that option, sometimes it's a pain, but I can't tell you how many times someone will ask me for a custom design, and I'm like, oh, I don't think I'd want to put those colors together. And I do it, and I'm like, I would never think to put those colors together. So just having an open mind and kind of thinking outside the box and having other people kind of, give you feedback is really huge. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there because I could keep going.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Danika. That was awesome. And we have plenty of time for questions. So I am going to start going through some of those. Let's see. I'm going to try and get them in, more are coming in. So I'm just going to kind of go down the list. And if they're a little out of order, I apologize, everyone. So favorite design magazines. You mentioned referencing design magazines.
So my go-tos, I am a traditionalist, maximalist. If I had to describe my style, I love chinoiserie, but I'm really like a new traditionalist. So I am an Decor, Architectural Digest. I have like, I'm in Boston. I got New England Home. And then I love Veranda. Veranda's been one of my favorites. House Beautiful. It all depends though. So if you're actually like, so this is what I would say is go to Barnes and Noble. They're like disappearing, but I loved Barnes and Noble because I would go in there, get my coffee, and they had every home decor magazine. Just like flip through and be like, oh my God, I love this one. You'll start to figure out which ones you kind of connect to, because you definitely want to stay in, you want to really own your style. You don't want to try to be someone else. You want to be you, and you're going to probably merge a couple styles together and create a whole new look. So.
Awesome. We've gotten quite a few questions about scale. So this one is, do you have a rule of thumb for motif sizes for home decor hero patterns?
Yes. Okay. So for home decor heroes, so I like to have a very large print often. And that is like, I would love to be able to do a whole like 27-inch repeat, but you have to have a lot of stuff going on, or it has to be really clean and precise. So I find like that 13.5 large scale seems to be a sweet spot. When you go to 13.5 and it's really kind of you can see the repeat very clearly, that is when you're going to maybe want to like look into doing a half drop to kind of, because since you're going to do a piece of wallpaper, you want it to kind of have that high and low and continue going like that across. So it doesn't feel like static all the way across. So really learn about half drops. And so if you're doing like a 13.5, definitely I would incorporate a half drop into that. If it needs it. Sometimes you don't. But yeah, I would say, so for small prints, I like to have my heroes be a little bit bigger, 13 to 27 in between there. 18 is a great one too for fabrics, not for wallpaper, obviously. But and then I like to mix it with that big and that little, because it just breaks it up and it makes it more interesting. So for small prints, I like to be in the range of 2 to 4 inches. My stripes, I have everything from a like 1/5 inch wide stripe to big fat 4 to 6 inch stripes on some things. Like the ones that are on the wall are about, I think, like 3.5. But like it's really going to be pattern play, and this is where you have to experiment. And the one thing I could tell you is, you don't have to wait for, like, if you're just trying to figure out scale, I use my printer every day. I go to Photoshop and I say print, and you could adjust the scale bigger and smaller, but you could also, if you save it as 8 inches, take print as it's like 100%, it'll print at 8 inches, and you can look at that repeat and be like, okay, I need to be smaller. Tape it to a pillow. Like tile it up, tape it to a pillow, and then like while you wait for your samples to come. Or if you,
I love that real life mock-up idea, just taping your paper.
It's all about mocking it up.
Yep, love that. We had a couple questions about what happens when you print these textures onto textured fabric, something like Belgian linen.
You get hang on, let me see if I have I know I have it here. All right, so I have.
We love a show and tell here at Spoonflower.
So there's Molly here, and I know I have. Sorry, this is kind of a mess in here. I just have it.
For those who have joined us for multiple sessions, you'll know that this is not the first session today where we have suddenly needed a show and tell.
Okay. So this one has a little bit of like more of a scratchy block printed. See how it kind of breaks up that solid ink a little bit. And then over here, this has a strié texture over it, but it really gives it a lot more depth, and it feels more expensive than if it was just a solid stripe, because it looks like it's a bit more aged and intentional. And then I think, all right, so I think I had this one up as, it was in blue and whites. This one, this one's harder to see because it's so light, but it's just a little bit more faded. It's not, if I had it solid, it would be a little bit darker and crispier. So it does give it a little bit more oomph.
Awesome. Let's see, we've got a lot of other good questions rolling in. All right, a few along these lines as well. How long did it take you to really grasp your knowledge in pattern design? I saw something else roll in about that as well.
So,
something like, I'm a curious beginner. How long has
so
it
I've been
taken
doing
you
this
to
now since
get over?
2011, but I also worked as a decorative artist. So I had to learn how to lay out pattern. I was painting like designs on floors and trellises and geometrics, painting big murals. So I had to figure out how to create repeats on the floor. And so, and I have a pretty balanced brain in a weird way because I'm super creative, but I'm also very much, I get spatial math. Like I have a good, like I get my dad's left brain there. So I love geeking out and trying to figure out numbers and math. So for me, it took me understanding the repeat and taking, I got this, it was the Spoonflower book. One of their first books you guys had, it was like how to make patterns. And I remember drawing them out on paper and like figuring that out. So that was one of the first things. Then I learned how to do it in Photoshop and Illustrator. I took a ton of Skillshare classes on pattern design, and I can't like just take as many classes as possible because there are seriously so many ways to do something in these programs, and there's faster ways than I'm teaching you. But I'm old, I feel like, and I've been doing this, and I still like am blown away when I see someone else do it. I'm like, oh, that's what that tool does. I had no idea. But it's because you get stuck in your ways. Like I'm an old dog. So I'm like, I've been doing it a certain way for so long that I don't change until all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's cool. So it's taken me a lot of trial and error. I would say I started in 2011 and it didn't really pick up for me until like 2014, but I didn't have a ton out there on Spoonflower. And then when I saw it start to like pick up is when I was like, all right, I got to take this seriously and really like treat it like a job. And learn more. So one of the things I do is I try to learn something new. It used to be like, I would be like, I'm going to learn something new every day. I just don't have the time for that. So I try to like once a month, take a weekend and be like, all right, no one bother me. I'm going to go take classes. And just because you need to stay current and you keep updating Cloud on Adobe. So I'm always just like, what did they do this time? I don't know what happened. Like, what is all these things? So you have to kind of like stay on top of educating yourself.
Yep, 100%. You're never fully over that learning curve. You're always just continuing to learn. I'm gonna go ahead and Jennifer, I saw your question about having trouble seeing the chat. Can we get a copy of these links? That's a great idea, and we will try and incorporate as many of these links as possible in the recap post, which will be up on the Spoonflower blog in just a few weeks. It'll actually be the same as the registration post. We're just going to update it with replays and recordings, and maybe we can work in some.
And I saw someone ask about how to get the block print pattern. I saw a couple of people ask that. And for my block prints, I carve a block. And, I carve my block prints, I roll them out, I print them. And that's what I start with. I kind of take that, import it into Photoshop. But then you can also just use your roller and roll over paper or ink up a whole solid block, put that down. And you could take how I showed you how to use scan in. You scan in that inked up square, crop it, and you just you pick up all the white negative spaces. And you just use that on top of an existing, you could draw something, but it'll give it that crispy, like where you have like little missing where the roller kind of missed some ink. I've created things like that. And the other thing too, is that you don't have to fill your entire screen. I meant to show that, I forgot to show this, but if you just wanted to fill in, say on here, if I just wanted to fill in, my light's so bright in here today, just the green part, I could use my magic wand on the layer with the green, highlight that, then create a layer right above it and then hit fill, and it'll only fill in the green spots, not the background. So if you want to add texture to just certain areas, you're going to select it and add a new layer right above it and then fill that new layer. So you could really be precise if you only want to put texture in one area or one spot.
Awesome. We had, let's see, Betsy, bright and early at the beginning of this session, asked a question, and I want to make sure we get to it. And this is more about your portfolio, Danika. Do you feel Christmas collections are still necessary in your portfolio, or do you focus more on evergreen home decor?
I focus more on evergreen home decor. I remember when I was like starting out, I was trying to do everything, and I realized I'm highly ADD, and I actually. I went to a behavior therapist, like trying to learn how to manage my time and manage me better, because like medication didn't work for me. So he taught me basically the golden rule, and it's you can do one thing really good at a time. So if you have like whatever you excel at, whatever your passion is, and for me, it's home decor fabrics. I had a moment where I was trying to make caftans, and when you start to spread yourself thin, that's where it kind of goes, and like I started noticing you lose traction. So I would say I do mostly home decor. I do have some Christmas patterns out there because I had made them in the past, but they're not really like big sellers for me. My stuff is all like plaids, home decor, stripes, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. This question just came in from Teresa and I love it. Can you talk a little bit about negative space? She says, I find I fill my patterns too much and they sometimes are too busy. Do you have a rule for this?
Yes. All right. So the fresh eyes rule is what I use all the time. So you're basically going to create your pattern and I want you to shut it off for a day. And then I want you to shrink it down really tiny before you shut it off. And then when you come back, it doesn't have to be a day, it can just be a couple hours. When you come back, I want you to click it back on and be like, whoa, like there's so much, like you have to kind of, if it looks crazy when it's really tiny, you have to kind of figure out where to edit. And that editing it yourself is the hardest thing because I'm a more is more girl and it is very frustrating and very hard. But yes, so I usually start off with when I make my hero patterns and stuff like that, I come up with an idea. Like I'm working on this big stripe in the background, that blue thing on, it's like, this is reversed right there. And I was like, I think I'm gonna like this really big. And I hate it big. So I'm working on it, kind of half shrinking it down, but I'm finding that there are certain areas of this that I just absolutely hate. And I was like, why do I hate this? And you have to really study it and then just if you design with everything on layers, start clicking off your layers. And that's the easiest way to edit because you will you'll be like, oh my God, this looks so much better. And do the same thing, click it off. And I want you to go away, go get a cup of coffee, come back, and then be like, oh, this looks better. Because like when you're looking at something too long, you're on top of it. And it's, sorry, my son's printing something. Thanks, Thomas.
Perfect timing. We actually have a couple of questions about your printer and scanner. So that really is perfect timing, actually. What printer and scanner do you use?
I am like super high end. No, I went to Target during COVID and they didn't have much on the shelf. Like it was right when you get to go back into the store and I didn't know what to buy. And I got the Epson, I got the inkjet that you could just, fill yourself because I was so tired of spending $100 on toner and print ink all the time. So I just got the basic Epson inkjet. I only use this for proofing my own stuff. I don't send this. I'm the only one that sees it. So I think I spent like $100 on this printer, and it scans great. It, just the lift top and yeah, you just want to have. I like to have a lift top if you're going to be scanning big things. I just take it to Staples. Sometimes I do like big pieces of art. I bring it to Staples and they will scan it in and put it on a thumb drive for you. And they have those huge scanners. So I'm like, you don't have to invest all that money. Just have someone else do it. Sub it out. Like one less thing you have to buy or do. So. And they will also print. They'll also print large. So if you have a big like repeat, they will print up to like on architectural paper. Just say, here, I want this printed at 20, like with a wallpaper, 24 by, and it's a 30-inch repeat. They'll print it out and you can proof it right there. And you can be like, I love it or I hate it. If you don't want to wait for your samples to come from Spoonflower.
Awesome. And Kathy says, I only know Illustrator for making patterns. Does Photoshop work the same way? So can you talk about the differences a little bit between Illustrator and Photoshop?
Yeah, so I learned, that's my son. So I learned Illustrator first before Photoshop, but I was having a hard time because I do a lot of watercolors and I was having a hard time getting them to keep that look. I took some watercolor Illustrator classes and I wound up just taking some Photoshop classes. It's different and not the same at all. Like it gives you a much more hand painted look. You get a lot more translucency and depth. Illustrator is great when I'm going to be doing something that I know I'm going to make a gazillion different sizes and I want to be able to scale it up big and small. I will go into Illustrator so I can vectorize it. But overall, I really, I don't use it. I use it maybe like 5% of my time, and the majority of the time, it's because I have patterns that I made on there and I have to go on there to recolor them. So but I'm a Photoshop girl now, just because I like the softness that it lets you have.
Awesome.
But yes, you can learn it. Just get a Skillshare.
Yes, and I think Catherine behind the scenes in the chat has been putting this in the chat, but I want to make sure everyone knows if you are a Craft Industry Alliance member, you get a discount with Skillshare, which is super helpful when you're learning like this to grow your business.
It's so worth it. And like, if you are going to actually turn this into a business, you get to write it off. So it's one of your tools.
There you go. Who knew they were coming to a design class and an accounting talk today? Let's see. So you talked a little bit about the DPI that you scan images at, but that has also brought up the question of eventually your files will be 150 DPI for Spoonflower. So can you talk about the difference between when you're scanning what you need versus when you're saving?
So when I scan, I like to scan big just in case I want to make that texture enormous and say 24 inches wide. So when I scan it in, I scan it in at a 600 DPI just so I get all the little bits and details. When I go to resize it, I'm most likely going to resize it to around like 12 or 13 and a half inches. So I have a nice half of wallpaper or half of a fabric tile. And I save it at 300 because I do like to save my final things for Spoonflower at 150. So it just uploads seamlessly. But what this lets me do is that once you save it, and you save it as you're going to be resizing this and moving this up and down. And so, because I always I go into my patterns and my textures and I open them up, I check the size, and then I will shrink them down to, if I'm going to do something really tiny and it's a big 12-inch by 300, I might say, okay, this is going to go into a 4x4 at 150 DPI final. That's when I will just resize. I'll figure out I'm going to want it this big. I like the size, but it's going to be, I shrink it down to 4 inches, I could change the DPI to 150. And then when I save it to my patterns, the defined pattern, that's separate from your file. You're just going to drop this on top. It's not going to affect your DPI of your actual pattern that you're putting it on. It's just, you want to resize it so that it could fit on there seamlessly. So you always want to have a number. So if you have an 8x8 inch by 150 pattern that you're going to be uploading, you want to make sure that number that you shrink it to, it could be 8, it could be 4, it could be 2, because it's going to fit across that entire pattern that you're putting it onto. If not, you'll start to notice at the seams, it gets a little wonky. But yeah, it doesn't affect your actual pattern. It's just, then when you go back to it, I never save it. I'm going to resize it. Then I just close it without saving because it'll just stay at its normal big size when I open it up again.
Awesome. Lisa is curious, do you ever use Procreate?
No, I have tried. This is one of my goals. It was for this year, was to learn Procreate. I haven't had the time, and I get on there and my brain is just so wired to use a mouse. And I use my iPad as a sidecar to draw on Photoshop, but I have not figured it out yet. It's one of my goals, but yeah, I would love to use Procreate, but yeah, I'll get there. I wish.
That's so I, spoiler alert, knew the answer to that already, but the reason I wanted us to talk about it is because I think it's really important that we realize that everyone has a different workflow. You've mentioned this earlier today. Everyone has a different preferred program, and I want to make sure that everyone knows that that's okay. If you already create textures a different way that Danika did today, that's okay. If you use a different program, it's totally okay. We all have our comfort zone.
Yeah, and you can find how to make textures on Skillshare, on Procreate, and there's going to be new ways and better ways. So
100%. All right, so we're at 1 minute. So Danika, the last thing I want to share with you is we have had several comments and questions come in here about, do you have a Skillshare class? Do you teach other classes? So I just wanted you to know that everyone in the chat has really enjoyed this and has learned a lot.
I would love to do that. This is my first class I've ever taught. So yeah. And I got through. I was so nervous to do this, guys. So, thank you for having me, because I was completely sweating bullets, but it was fun. And I maybe I'll do one in the future. I'd have to get really organized for that.
I think that this is your sign. Everyone, so you just heard This was Danika's first virtual class. She was nervous. Show her some love in the chat. Thank you so much, Danika, for this workshop. I know I learned a lot. That perspective crop tool blows my mind. This was all fantastic, and just thank you so much for joining us today for the symposium.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I hope to I can't wait to see what you guys make, and yeah, just do it. This is the best. I mean, if you love it, you will figure out a way to do it, and just don't stop. Keep making stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Danika. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And I hope that some of you will join us in the next few symposium sessions today. So have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye, everyone.